great guests. Firstly, Johnny, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Fresh off that nice draw between us on Sunday,
Oh,
so we
don't
shouldn't
mention
be
that.
falling out anytime soon.
No. And I'm also joined by two new guests today who we haven't met before, Bernard and Jack. How are you doing, boys? You all right?
I'm fine, mate. Yeah, glad to be here. Nice to see you all.
Jack, what about yourself as well?
Ditto. It's a pleasure to make my debut. I've walked around my town centre earlier holding up the shirt, and I am excited to get going.
Glad to hear it. We've obviously got a lot to talk about today. It's obviously the international break. England go into this international break 3 wins from 3 in World Cup qualifiers. I'll come to you first, Johnny. After the excellent European Championships we've had, obviously we got beat to Italy in the final. Do you think there'll be any mental hangover from that Gareth Southgate and his team will try to get rid of early doors?
I don't think so. I don't think there'll be a mental hangover. I think the squad just seemed to be a bit different compared to other years. They all seem to be so together, and even though we obviously lost on penalties in the worst way possible in the final, we actually seem to came out of it all right, quite positive, still an upbeat mood. And because this squad is so together, a lot of them are quite young. We've kept the majority of the squad going into these batch of games. I think obviously they'll be disappointed, but I think with the crowd at Wembley as well, they'll give them all a positive reception. I think within the first couple of minutes of the first game, I think that sort of hangover will go out the window quite quickly.
What about yourself, Bernard? Do you like the Gareth Southgate regime? I know he gets a lot of stick England fans, but what do you make of the England squad and how it's shaping up going into these next qualifiers?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, Southgate's a steady Eddie, isn't he? He's a steady hand at the tiller. But I think the thing is with this team as well, there doesn't seem to be any real clicks in it. They all seem to be, as you said, I think Johnny was saying there, they're all sort of together, and there's a lot of younger players, obviously, who sort of seem to have a good laugh and get on with it. Whether I still worry about Southgate when it comes to the crunch, when it comes to the crucial elements of games. It's all right in these games these group games where the teams are not quite as good. But when it comes to those big games like the Italy game, where he sort of just he doesn't give them free rein, he sort of clams up a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm still happy with it. They've got a young team. Sometimes those lads can perhaps work against Southgate a little bit in a way and be a bit more natural perhaps than he wants. But we'll have to see going forward, won't we?
Yeah, lads, for those both of you not aware, Johnny will be aware, but I'm a massive Southgate fan. You mentioned there about the lack of clicks within the squad, and I think that's key moving forward for England. We had the golden generation who couldn't perhaps put the differences aside going into these major tournaments. And like you say, we've got a young squad, and going into this next few years, it looks pretty bright. Jack, what do you think on the squad moving forward?
I'm very positive about England right now. I think we've got a nice young group who are really coming through and are developing each week. I like Southgate as well. I would sort of agree with the previous statement that Italy final was an England game I've seen before, in terms of it was basically a carbon copy of the Croatian game, wasn't it, from 3 years ago, in terms of we took the lead, we thought, hey, this is nice, we're beating Italy, it's someone good. And then, it all went horribly wrong very predictably. My slight concern with this squad is kind of in the forward areas, to be honest with you. Harry Kane's obviously been on his nice long holiday. Calvert-Lewin's dropped out today. I'm going to really upset Johnny here.
I knew this was coming.
I'm not the biggest Patrick Bamford fan. I'm sorry. Does that make me a bad person? I don't know.
I don't know. No, don't think so.
I would have liked to have seen Mason Greenwood start up, because I think he's been pretty good when he's played down the middle for United this season. And just some other players who seem quite out of form. Bukayo Saka's obviously had a dreadful start at Arsenal. It's not entirely his fault. Jesse Lingard barely plays for United anymore. Raheem Sterling's not starting every week for City. There are issues, but having said that, we shouldn't have any problems in these next 2 games, really.
Yeah, I think you raised a really interesting point there, Jack, about the personnel that have come into the squad in this particular camp. And I'll just raise that question with you there, Johnny, being a Leeds fan. Would you like to see Gareth Southgate rotate the squad a bit and try and see some new faces in this camp? Because really, if we're all being honest here, nobody is as interested in these kind of games as like the tournaments, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately. We probably have qualified for the World Cup, dare I say it. So, would you like to see him experiment and maybe give old Paddy a go, considering he scored against his old club Burnley at weekend?
Wait, I think I cut out. Oh, no. If by experiment you mean start Bamford every game, then I'm all for that. Honestly, I'm all for it. I think with this squad, obviously.
Oh, I think we may have lost Johnny there. I don't know if he's. I'll just quickly put that same question to you. Oh, he's back. He's back. You there? There, Johnny?
Wait, did you not hear any of that?
No,
we lost that. We lost that
again, mate.
Oh, I'll just start this Bamford propaganda all over again.
Yeah, no worries.
I was going to say, if by experimenting you mean starting Bamford every game, then I'm all for it. I think I was watching his press conference, sort of in awe, really, today. Bamford's sort of like a 20-minute long press conference, and he mentioned obviously Calvert-Lewin being injured. He didn't pick Danny Ings, which I was really confused about as well.
Yeah.
And I thought he's started the season a lot better than Bamford. Scored a fantastic bicycle kick and wasn't in the squad, but I wasn't really complaining. But I was watching Bamford's press conference, and I think someone asked him, "You've been compared to Harry Kane quite a lot," and almost like I know, I was as shocked as you were, but sort of just saying he's in a similar mould, and Bamford disagreed, but I just would like to see him play a lot. I just think for him to make his debut for England will be fantastic for him and his family. And like you say, Joe, these are perfect times to experiment with this different systems to build up before the World Cup. Like you say, touch wood, we should be okay in the qualifiers. But to experiment, because some people were saying, obviously, put Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield, or Reece James can play in a different position. As many people may agree, disagree, these are the types of games where you properly try and test it. But if Bamford can get his first goal for England, then I don't really care what happens in these games, to be honest. That's all I'm really focused on.
Yeah, unlike many Burnley fans, I actually quite like Patrick Bamford. I've spoken to him on one occasion at Burnley FC in the community, and he just seems like a very nice guy. And often footballers are just misunderstood and get pigeonholed into like a certain type of person just because he nearly had an opportunity to have a Harvard degree, for example. I saw you shaking your head there at some of Johnny's comments about Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield, Bernard. Would you like to maybe, if you were Southgate, would you like to maybe take this opportunity to experiment with an attacking formation, for example, and maybe go for an attacking three-man midfield instead of two sitting midfielders?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a shame that Foden's injured at the moment, because obviously I would have liked to see more of him in the Euros as well. But yeah, I mean, let's face it, these are just these World Cup qualifiers. I mean, they're not as different. Is it the Nations League we play in these days when we're playing friendlies? I mean, let's face it. Yeah, I mean, we know what Southgate's going to do. He's going to do his tried and trusted until it's almost certain that we're going to be in the World Cup finals. We know that's the sort of guy he is. So he's going to start Kane. He's going to start Sterling. He's going to start the guys that have not let him down as far as he's concerned. So, but I mean, we should be getting 2, 3, 4 goals up against these teams, which allows him then to bring these younger lads on, and try different things. And that's what we want from a manager. That's what all managers should do. And hopefully he will do that.
Yeah, definitely. I saw you mention earlier as well, Jack, the likes of Jesse Lingard coming back into the fold. Would you like to see him be rewarded for not reacting badly to being dropped by England for the Euro squad, for example? Because I always thought that was Gareth Southgate testing individuals' resolve and see how they would react. But Jesse Lingard just strikes me as a player that just loves to play. And if Gareth Southgate can give him that freedom to go out there and express himself in the World Cup qualifiers with not much being on the games, then you never know. He could stake a claim for a starting position in going into Qatar next November.
I'd like to see it, but it's not going to happen. We know what it's going to be. We know what these next 3 games are going to be. It's going to be Rice and Phillips in the holding midfield. It's going to be Sterling left, Kane right, Sancho, whoever. It'll just be one of that same combination. I think it's worth saying that Hungary aren't mugs. They're not exactly. They're not like the worst team going. They did draw with Poland recently. We're down to 10 men. They're not the worst team in the world. So I assume that Southgate will probably, bore us all to tears when we're watching the Hungary game. What, Thursday is the Hungary game, I think?
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
I think if you are going to experiment, you could do it against Andorra, who, are not the greatest team in the world. You could do something against them. And then by that point, when you've got 2 wins against them two, that's 15 points out of 15, and which would be a good starting point for hopefully qualifying next summer. Again, I don't know. I do feel Jesse Lingard needs to move in the next 5 hours. He needs to go somewhere. I don't think he's going to play much for United, which is going to really harm his chances of getting in. Because I think he's a terrific player, and he proved that at West Ham. But it's going to be difficult for him to get in that United team now, which has just got all the attacking options going.
I'd personally drive down to London and in my wheelchair and give Jesse Lingard a backie if it meant him coming to Burnley. I think he's a great player, and hopefully he gets a chance to shine in these World Cup games, qualifier games, sorry. I noticed that we're speaking about Hungary there. I think the game on Thursday is actually behind closed doors as a punishment for their homophobic abuse banners in the Euros. Obviously, the Hungary fans gained a lot of plaudits during the Euros for the partisan crowd and their electric atmosphere. I think their stadiums was one of the only ones to be at full capacity during the whole tournament. How do you think that might affect the flow of the game, Johnny, on Thursday? Because we've seen that happen in the UEFA Nations League against Croatia for similar sorts of reasons. And I seem to remember the game was a bit flat when we played them at their stadium, Johnny.
Yeah, behind closed doors, football is never really what you want to see, is it? Because we've obviously got fans back now. When I watch the highlights of games last year, I think, how did we even put up with that? It's just so dull, so boring. And seeing the fans back in now, it's great. And obviously, it's not exactly the most star-studded game to be watching and have fans in, but any game, any televised game that we'll be watching England play, you want to have fans back in. And like you say, Hungary, they were in the group of death, weren't they, in the Euros, were they? And they did fantastically well. Yeah, they did so well with their fans in the stadium. So it'll be obviously frustrating not to have them in there. And just from a watching point of view, it won't be as enjoyable. And these England games I'm not the biggest England fan. I'm not going to claim to be. And watching the World Cup qualifiers are sort of tough enough when it's 0-0 in 80 minutes against Hungary, and you're just passing it from Rice to Phillips, from Rice, and you're just kind of thinking, what am I actually watching this for? But having no crowd added to that as well makes it a little bit less of a watch.
Yeah, I think you raised some interesting points there. What about you, Bernard? Do you think it might potentially give the likes of Hungary a better chance of getting something from the game? We saw in the Euros they had a very close striker who held the ball up well, and their wingers caused havoc to a lot of teams during the group stages through their sheer tenacity alone, really, just to cover some ground. What qualities do you think England need to be wary of when coming up against Hungary? And do you think they could have a slight advantage or disadvantage with it being behind closed doors?
Yeah, I think the closed doors thing, I mean, it affects teams like Hungary, doesn't it? They rely so heavily on that support. You go to these places and it's very partisan, isn't it? That's the problem. If they haven't got that, it's going to be a big advantage to England. I mean, I think they're rated 40 Hungary, aren't they? In these charts they do of teams' ratings, and they're like any team in the top 50. I think has got abilities to actually produce something, but I think they'll sadly miss. Sadly miss the fans. That's what these sort of teams in these countries miss that sort of partisanship and the fans getting behind them. And I think it's great for England. I think we couldn't, I know it's a shame from a viewing point of view, but as far as advantage, I think it definitely gives an extra edge to England. Just and they say it's not that long ago these players haven't, they're quite used to playing now to nil crowds. So I think it'll be a big advantage to England. I think Hungary will put up a good show, but I can't see them actually upsetting England in that game.
Yeah, he's hoping they don't upset us because obviously it's a bit embarrassing to lose to Hungary regardless of how well they did in the Euros. What about you, Jack? Do you think the no crowd could give us an advantage to go out there and get a big scoreline and beat Hungary by a big deficit?
Maybe it would certainly help. Again, when England go to Eastern Europe, it's one of their big games, isn't it? And they get very excited about it. And the fact that they're not there is a shame. I mean, their best player, Dominic Szoboszlai, is going to be back for Hungary. He's apparently quite good. I can't say I've seen much of him. But, I mean, you never know in these England games, do you? Sometimes, it could, remember when we lost to the Czech Republic in Prague last year and we were terrible, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that England could be naff and not create anything for an hour, then find themselves 1-0 down. And so that is slightly interesting. I'm struggling to find more interesting things to the Hungary game. I mean, you never know what Sam Matterface is going to come out with on commentary. That could be quite fun. He might sort of enact the purge again. That was quite funny. But yeah, I don't know. I just can't see anything else apart from a 3-0 England win, really.
I like you, Jack. You seem to say it as it is. Brilliant, mate. Keep it up. Thankfully, though, we do have fans returning for the Andorra game, I believe. All being well, the stadium will be at full capacity for the first time in over 18 months. Obviously, Johnny, we saw the impact that the supporters had on the games at Wembley during the Euros, and it was brilliant to see so many people happy, jumping through flights of the stairs and things like that. In the Germany game, I saw in the commentator shouting this time more than any other time. I think that's a FA Cup rendition. How important is it to have fans back in the stadium? And although they're, as I said, meaningless games to some people, that we get behind the squad for friendlies as well as, major games.
Yeah, well, it's the first time the England fans have been together after the Italy game. It's a great chance to show support to Bukayo Saka, Marcus Rashford,
Yes.
Jadon Sancho if they are to play, because obviously we've seen it in club football, Spurs fans applauding Saka, which we saw, which was fantastic. But as a country, we haven't been able to see it yet. Of course, the last game that they played in front of the England fans was that Italy game. So it's just a great chance to sort of, like I started off saying originally when we first came on, get that Italy game out of the way, get the atmosphere back up. And we saw over the Euros, Wembley was at what I've seen probably its best atmospheres with an England game. The England games are never usually that good. Obviously, it was a major tournament. We were progressing a lot further. But like I said, I think the main thing will be to show support to Saka, to Rashford, to Sancho. And if they can get on the score sheet or do anything in the game, it will do them a world of good for their confidence as well. But it'll just be good for the nation just to sort of get that Italy game out of our minds and start a new sort of fresh start, if you like.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially on the comments about Rashford and Saka, and Mings as well for his if he overcomes his broken rib, supposedly giving him some support as well for his words on mental health and speaking out against racism. We've got some really good individuals in that squad, and how pleased are you to see Bernard that they're now going to be getting the support and adulation they deserve. Wembley these days under Southgate, especially in the tournament, is actually becoming a bit of a fortress. I mean, Southgate previously said that under the initial stages of his regime, there was apathy where people were throwing paper aeroplanes to pass the time. I once went to an England game and I couldn't wait to have a McDonald's on the way home. That's how bored I was watching the game. But it's very different now. What are your thoughts on seeing Wembley at full capacity against Andorra?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Have they actually sold all the tickets for the Andorra game?
I'm not sure. I'm just making an assumption there.
Yeah,
but I presume it'd be, they're at least allowed to have full capacity, let's say, then, shall we?
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference, isn't it? I mean, let's face it. We know England at Wembley. It's not been fantastic over the years. Let's be honest about it. But I mean, we remember the Euros back in the 90s and these Euros, and the atmosphere was tremendous. And there's a possibility that we might not carry that over into these sort of games, especially against a team like Andorra, which will be such a shame. And but as I say, if the thing is, if the players are up for it, the players go for for it, then that'll lift the crowd anyway. It doesn't take the crowd to lift the players. It's a bit of both as well. You've got to have the actual players actually, play that. This is why I want Southgate to be a bit more expansive in what he does. If he can get those classy play, get the Grealish playing, get the movement, get the fans up for it, and that's all part of. But if he goes back to his normal basic 11 against Andorra, I mean, why bother? Let's have a bit of excitement. Let's give the fans, if they are a bit quiet, let's give the fans something to cheer. And obviously, they both feed off each other, in my opinion.
Tell you what is different, Bernard, Patrick Bamford. That's who's different.
Tell you what, if we're playing Andorra on Sunday and I see Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice in that team, I think I'm going to scream. Can I give you some Andorra facts?
Yeah, go on, Jake. Go ahead.
They are 186th in the world. They have won 1 in 26. Their captain is a man called Ildefines Lima. He is 41 years old. He has played 130 times for Andorra and he's scored 11 goals, which makes him their top scorer ever. He's centre-back. And basically, they're not very good. They've scored 3 goals in 12 games. And they're not quite San Marino levels of bad, but it's a game that England should win. I'd say what will be interesting. If Jadon Sancho and Jack Grealish, I think they were 2 of the sort of nation's sweethearts in the summer, weren't they? And everybody wanted them to play more and everybody wanted them to start.
I don't know about Grealish now. He's probably on the back burner now. He plays for us, so he probably.
Well, this Now that they've got their big summer moves and they play for big glamorous clubs rather than NAF, Aston Villa or Borussia Dortmund, I wonder if they'll start more now. That'll be quite interesting.
From your Andorra facts there, it seems like I could really get him on Sunday. I'm going to put my name forward and give Gareth a go.
Give it a go, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Villa Park is a bit of a fortress, Jack. I will agree. Do you think England can utilise the support to their advantage and do the same at Wembley? Or
well, I once went to the only time I've been to watch England at Wembley was when we beat San Marino 5-0 and Roy Hodgson was in charge. And it took England half an hour to take the lead for a dodgy Wayne Rooney penalty. We saw Matt Letizia on the way in. That was probably the highlight of the day. That's my sort of major memory of England games at Wembley. But as you say, during big games, I mean, the atmosphere of the Germany game in the Euros looked unbelievably good.
I was going to say, this is what Bernard was saying, like the atmospheres may go back to what they were. Like you say, you've just watched, in a sense, the team you're supporting win 5-0, and the best thing you look forward to is seeing Matt Letizia and sort of just wanting to get out of the ground. It sort of just shows, even if they are to win like 10-0, people are still going to be going, what time is it? Do you want to leave now? It's 80 minutes. Do you sure you just want to leave now? I don't know. I think the only times we will, and the Euros may have changed that, I don't know, but obviously, we had a fantastic World Cup campaign in 2018, and then the atmospheres were still not great after that. But hopefully, something's just changed with the pandemic. It might boost people.
Let's face it. If you bought tickets to go and watch England against Andorra, I mean, you've got to give it your all, haven't you? I mean, what's the point otherwise? You've actually gone out and bought and paid money for this game. So I mean, it's not one of the best games in the world. So surely, if you're going to do that, you've got to lift the atmosphere anyway. I mean, what's the point of paying for the ticket otherwise?
Yeah, exactly. I think with football fans, pessimism is just built within our DNA before we're born, or as soon as we start supporting football, we're told to be pessimistic, or never expect anything from England, or your own domestic club. It's quite funny how we just return to default and be pessimistic. But I think there's sorry, Jack.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think that is turning now. I do think that is changing now after we've had such good tournaments previously. What will really make it go back to that is if we get to Qatar now, because I think there are expectations now in Qatar that we could actually go and win that thing. Because I think that's going to be quite an open tournament. I think because obviously no one really knows what to expect of it. It's a Winter World Cup. We've got a few young players. If we get knocked out in the second round to that. The USA or something, that's gonna really bring the atmosphere. So I think we need to capitalize on this now and really,
And in terms of the players as well, we've got a real good blend of youth and experience with that. It's a Jordan Henderson who's just signed extension at Liverpool today, really playing lots of high-profile games and got like 200 of them under the belt. Foden, James, etc. One of those people that gets a lot of good presses for his abilities, Mason Greenwood, but he's not been in the squad this time around. And there's actually talk of him switching allegiance to Jamaica. I don't know if you've seen that, Johnny, and what do you make of that? Should he stay or should he go, as the class say?
I haven't seen that news. No, I think he's been unlucky not to get into the side. A bit like Danny Ings has started the season really, really well. And was he named for the Euros in like the
Yes, he was.
33-man preliminary squad and then went out? Or was he injured? Or was it?
Yeah, he was named. I think he got injured and decided to stay home. I think he sort of realised that he would be on the fringes this time around. But yeah, a lot of English-born players are switching allegiances to the likes of Jamaica and other countries as well.
Yeah.
Do you think Mason Greenwood should do that, or should he stick to his roots and be patient here and see what happens? Because I think Southgate does like him. I'll come on to that in a moment, but I'll get your thoughts first.
No, yeah, I think as much as I say he's obviously played for Man United, I don't really like him, but as a footballer, he's got potential in this side. I think he could really do well in this England squad, and I think if he sticks it out a bit, he could be put into the squad. I don't really know what Southgate's reasoning was for him not to be put in there. He sort of did the thing where it was like, oh, he's on our minds, he's in our thoughts. He's on the fringe of getting in, but he's not there at the moment. I can't tell if what happened with, was it him and Foden in Iceland like last year, has got any effect on this. But then Phil Foden's been chosen and actually got into the Euro squad as well and started a number of games in that tournament. So I don't think that's got anything to do with it. I think England just do have a lot of attacking talent in those wide areas. Now Jack Grealish is playing for Man City. He sort of gets a bit more of a boost now. And I just think with Greenwood, he should stick it out a bit. But if he's not getting the opportunities, he's a fantastic young player. He's doing so well in the Premier League. Then you probably can't really blame him for switching. But he won't have as much success as if he goes for England. So I wouldn't blame him either way, to be honest.
Yeah, like you say, I think Southgate, I read today, is monitoring the situation with him. He knows Southgate has said Greenwood himself does want to play for England, and he's spoken to his family members and his club. And he said, Southgate, I think as well, he wants some of the younger players who are perhaps on the fringes of the squad to get more games under the belt domestically. I know it's hard for you, Bernard, being from the blue side, to talk about Greenwood, but do you rate him as a player and see him as a future England international, maybe even as a lone striker, rather than the winger that he is now, somebody who may replace Harry Kane?
Well, I think the problem with any young United player is as soon as you play a couple of games and play okay, all of a sudden the world beaters and they're expected to make every squad. And I think Greenwood has just got to do a little bit more for me. And at the end of the day, if Southgate takes him to one side or brings him up and says, look, you're in my plans for the future, blah, blah, blah. I mean, why would he consider going to play for Jamaica or anybody else? At the end of the day, he's got to believe in himself that he can get into that England team. That's what players, you have to think you've got the ability to do it. So I'd be disappointed if he does move. But as I said, it's very early days. But I say the media build these guys up that they think they should be playing, and it's not quite right, I don't think. And I think there's plenty of time, and I think if he jumps ship now and goes, it'll be very, very, a bad decision for him. And I think if Southgate should be able to pull him to one side and have a word and sort that out and make sure that you're there in my plans for the future. Just keep progressing, just keep on playing, keep on doing what you're doing, improving, and he'll be in that England squad if he's good enough.
Yeah, again with you, Jack, I know it's a bit of a touchy subject, but one of your former players is actually probably situated in his position for England in Jack Grealish. Do you see somebody like Mason Greenwood overthrowing Jack Grealish's position, or like the lads have said, should he bide his time at the moment and get in there when he can?
I think he's terrific. I think he's a really, really good player. And he's only, 20, 19? He's got plenty of time yet. And I think he's a really good finisher. He proved that with the finish against Leeds. Sorry, Johnny, and the finish against Wolves at the weekend.
Right. It's okay, here's what it is.
But no, I think he's got bags of potential. You know, there is plenty. I don't think we need to panic yet. I really don't. But I would have. It does seem a bit strange that with Calvert-Lewin's dropped out and we've not had anybody replace them. I do think we are slightly light up front, and I think it would have been an ideal choice to have Greenwood in. One thing I would say about Greenwood that slightly concerns me is this Cristiano Ronaldo transfer, which would go one of two ways. I think. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the positive side of things, what better role model is there to play with than Cristiano Ronaldo? But I do think Greenwood's best position is down the centre, and I think Ronaldo is going to want to play pretty much every game down the centre. So how often is he really going to play there this season in the big games, which is where you want him to have experience, because that's where England struggle sometimes.
Yeah, I do think the future is bright though for the likes of Greenwood, and time will tell what happens with him. But I definitely think, from a personal perspective, he should bide his time with England, and in a few years' time, when perhaps Harry Kane retires from international duty to do a Jamie Vardy and save his legs for domestic competitions and leagues, then Greenwood for me could lead the line, because that does concern me ever so slightly that. After Harry Kane, where are we going to get the goals from? Like, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a good player, but he doesn't have that aura about him that Harry Kane does, where he could be anywhere, stood on the pitch, and something could happen. But away from the pitch for a second now, Gareth Southgate has said that he's not going to get involved in discussions such as vaccination promotion going forward, because he said, quite interestingly, he received more stick for doing a government promotional video on the vaccine than actually losing in the Euros 2020 final versus Italy. I personally think footballers are doing a great job highlighting issues outside of football, and that, to me, as Johnny is aware, means more than things on the pitch. But I'm interested to see your point of view on this, Johnny, whether you're one of these people who would agree with those on Twitter when they quite annoyingly say stick to football, or do you think it's healthy for the game that we are now seeing different types of characters within the sport?
I think it depends on what they're trying to promote. Obviously, with the Black Lives Matter, the racism stuff, we can all agree that what they're doing on the pitch is completely fine, and they're promoting a fantastic cause in a sense to, stop racism in football and in the world. That's absolutely fine. I'm not one of these people who's anti-vax these conspiracies. There are people who think that, and obviously there is, in a sense, potentially a right or a wrong in some people's minds. That's not a case with racism if it's right or wrong, which is where I think with the vaccination thing, maybe it's a bit like, I don't think you'll see anything like that. Like, people take the knee at the beginning of the game for racism. I don't think you'll see like a vaccination thing on before kickoff, anything like that. I don't think we'll see anything like that. If he wants to be in a like an advert or NHS advert, he shouldn't really be criticised for it, because at the end of the day, he's just promoting his opinion. If it's his opinion, then that's absolutely fine. But I don't think it's on the same level as racism in football at all. And I mean, I don't know what other people's views are on the vaccination. I've been double jabbed and I've seen them absolutely fine. But I think bringing all like the vaccine stuff into football is it's not for me on the same level as racism, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, without going into too much detail with it politically, what's your opinions on it, Bernard? Because I personally believe we can use football as a force for good. And these group of players in my lifetime, I haven't seen anybody as good as these people on these type of subjects. What's your opinion, Bernard, on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I go back a bit longer than you guys, and sort of trying to mix politics and football never really worked in the old days. It was always frowned upon various ways and various things. I mean, our manager got frowned upon for wearing certain badges or certain tops that said certain things and all this. And it is this line, isn't it? As Johnny was saying about the racism, everyone can get behind stuff like that. But I mean, I've been double jabbed as well, and obviously, but at the end of the day, I can see both sides. Yeah, I mean, it's a choice issue, etc. So obviously, it's going to upset people if someone's promoting it. But at the end of the day, it's also to protect other people. So I mean, it is so difficult, and the trouble is people's opinions now in this country. It's so divided. There's no real. There's no in between, no middle ground, is there anymore? People are either one thing or the other, and that's the problem. So they have to be very careful, footballers and managers, when they start getting behind these campaigns, because, as I say, certain people will frown upon it. But it's such a shame that it is. But and sadly, that's the society in the country at the moment that we're living in. That's just how it is. But we do have to be very careful, I think, with the people doing this. But everyone should have their own choice. But again, there's limitations as well. You say that, but you still would like people to protect other people by doing certain things. But hey, that's how it is. That's life at the moment.
Absolutely. What's your thoughts on the matter, Jack? What do you think? Should politics be kept out of football, or does it have to be a balance to it?
I don't think they should. I think my least favorite kind of person on Twitter, well, obviously not my least, but one of my least favorite people on Twitter is the person who goes, just stick to football, Marcus Rashford, just stick to football, mate. That's all you're good for. And if that was the case, he wouldn't have fed lots of hungry children last year if he hadn't have done that. No. And I just think it's very sad that we have to have these conversations so often, because there's just some people, mainly online, let's be honest. I think it's less of an issue in the stadium, but it's these people online, and it doesn't take a lot to wind me up, to be honest with you, because Steve Bruce had this issue recently in Newcastle, didn't he? I believe he said that some of the players just aren't taking the vaccination. So I don't think footballers just stick to football. I think if they've got a message to say, they've got the platform. I mean, some of these people, they're incredibly famous and they've got a platform to discuss big issues. I don't see the problem with it. I think Gareth Southgate's an excellent statesman. I think his interviews and the way he talks and the way he, just the way he dresses, the way he handles himself, the way he talks about important issues, I think is to be admired. And I think football would be a better place if there was more Gareth Southgates off the pitch. You can say what you want about him tactically, but I think he's a good egg.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I could, I'd get Gareth Southgate's face put up somewhere in my room as like a mosaic to pay homage to that wonderful human being. But another subject away from the pitch itself, England are considering perhaps doing a U-turn on their 2030 World Cup bid and opting for a 2028 Euros bid or 2032 Euros bid instead. What's your thoughts on this, Johnny? And do you think it's the right decision?
To be honest, as long as we get one of them, I don't really mind, to be honest. I think in a sense, we kind of forget the Euros that we just had. Effectively, our games were held in our country, apart from one, I think, was it? I think majority of the games were at Wembley, and it was fantastic for the country. And this was during a pandemic, during a really tough time. So I think any of them that we can get would be fantastic. Look, the World Cup is deemed to be a bigger tournament than the Euros in some people's eyes. I would tend to potentially agree with that, but I think if we could get either of the tournaments, I think it would be fantastic. One of the things that obviously comes with it is we see, obviously, with Qatar, with people trying to build the stadiums and stuff like that, and people dying as a consequence of it. You don't want to see that at all, and we don't want to put the country into some sort of financial crisis either. But if it can be done safely with people's best interests at the forefront, then I think getting any of the tournaments would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree there. What about you, Bernard? Are you a World Cup man or are you a Euros man, and which would you like to see more?
Well, I must admit, I was a bit very, very disappointed. I mean, if you look at that England-Italy game, I only saw snippets, but obviously I don't want to see that sort of violence coming into things. And that's the sort of thing that will probably put in jeopardy any hope of us doing something like this in the future. Yeah. And it's sad. I mean, after this 18 months of fans not being able to get in the grounds, there is a sort of tendency to some of the thug element seems to have arrived back. It's never really been as big a problem in the Premier League, but obviously to see it international, see Italian fans not able to leave the ground without getting jumped on. It's absolutely, that to me, we don't deserve it based on that. We're going to have to prove ourselves that we can actually, where we can rise above that and be better. And I think in the next 2 or 3 years, I think around this, the football, our grounds now in the Championship or the Premier League, whatever it is, we're going to have to start sort of realising and sort of getting on top of this, because I can see it sort of coming back into our game a little bit. And I'm not very happy about it, to be honest with you. I don't think we really deserve anything if that sort of thing is going to happen. As I say, I saw bits on the internet after the Italy game, and it was horrible to watch. And I'm sure it was only isolated people, but I mean, I watched about a 5-minute video, literally, of Italian fans just being attacked as and when they came out of tunnels. So I'm sorry, I don't think we should even be considered for anything unless we sort of get a grip of this. To be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. I concur with everything you've just said there, and I'm sure you agree with all that, Jack, I presume.
Well, it's difficult to add anything else because it's so right. I think that's, it doesn't matter which one we go for, the Euros or the World Cup. We're not going to get either, are we? Let's be honest. After what happened in that Euro final, it was very embarrassing, really. I know that we have lots of lovely stadiums and we have the infrastructure and we have the, obviously we love football. But, you do think, England fans, they are better now. And but you still see pre-pandemic when, was it the Nations League final and semi-final in Porto? I think it was. And they roughed up the square there and stuff. It's just, they've got a really bad reputation. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And when it comes to voting in the World Cup, if you're going to look at other countries rather than England, they're going to think, well, look what happened in the final of the Euros. It was an absolute disaster, really, wasn't it? Let's be honest. I think it's very difficult, really.
Yeah, we'll see what happens on that subject. But on to a more positive note now. Safe standing seems to be seemingly about to return before the end of the season. Obviously, I can't take part in that, but what do you think on the subject, Johnny? Do you think it's a good thing for football to see the return of safe standing in a good manner?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think, obviously, I'm not too sure about other grounds, but when I'm at Leeds in the Cup, you are standing when there are just, every area is a sitting area, really, isn't it? But your away ends, people stand in. There are obviously some grounds, some stands in every ground. The people stand in, and it brings a bit more of an atmosphere for me. I was sat in a couple of weeks ago against Everton. The only ticket I could get was in the family stand, and it was sat down, and I was like, I'm looking at the South stand and the Cup, and I'm thinking the atmosphere is just a lot better somehow. Just by standing up, it makes you just feel a lot better about the game and the atmosphere. So I think implementing that, and obviously the key word in it is safe, as long as it is safe for everyone and nothing like what we've seen before happens. I'm all for it, really. Obviously, there are going to be some areas in the ground, like I mentioned, there are family stands in, I presume, every ground. You're not going to want to take your 5-6-year-old kid, putting them in a safe standing area and what you would call limbs, on them. So there obviously have to be areas that are still seated, but your main standing areas in grounds, I'm all for putting safe standing in.
Yeah, brilliant. I totally agree there. I do believe it adds an extra, jovial atmosphere to the proceedings. What about you, Bernard? We've
got them at the Etihad. We've now got a safe standing rail seats in the South Stand, which spread all across the bottom tier now. Which I wouldn't say in the first couple of games we played, the atmosphere has been pretty good. Norwich and Arsenal, it was very good. I wouldn't say it was anything better than it was last season, where we could stand up. And we were allowed to stand up, even though officially City still say we can't. The stewards turn a blind eye because I'm in what's called the singing section, and I do sing all the game. But I have lots around me who are on the phones and chatting to the mates who don't sing, and that's a bit of a bugbear with me. If you stand up at a game, as far as I'm concerned, I'm 62, and I stand up and enjoy it and shout and sing and get behind my team, and I get a bit miffed with these guys who are in the so-called singing section sat on the phones, but a real standing section is fantastic, and hopefully we can obviously in various grounds across the country, again on the basis of this trouble we've got in the Euros, but as long as fans behave. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I say at least it gives a little bar for me to lean against now, because I'm 62, so halfway through the second half, and I just lean against it at the front, which is nice. In the past, I couldn't do that; I would have fell over into the seats in front of me. But there you go. Yeah, I think it'll work fine. It's certainly going to work fine at City, and I'm sure more grounds and the laws will be changed to actually hopefully bring this rail seating in at every ground, and certainly in the Premiership and the Championship.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Jack, I've been to Villa Park once to watch Burnley versus Aston Villa, and one thing that struck me straight away was the atmosphere at the ground. Do you think it would add to the noise that you see at Villa Park, and is it something you would get behind and try get involved in that sort of area of the stadium yourself?
Yes, and yes. I was there against Newcastle the other week, and I didn't sit. I was in the north stands, like opposite the whole end, so like the one which is in theory the family stand, and I didn't sit down for 1 second during it. I mean, admit, it was the first game back with a full house after COVID, so that is going to be different. It probably won't be like that every week. I'd be for it. Having been to a couple of games in Germany, the atmosphere there in the safe standing area is terrific. Now, the thing is, with safe standing, I asked my mum about this earlier, actually, because she's a big Villa fan. And she remembers the days of standing in the whole end and other areas. And it was horrible, like really horrible. People, just drunk and just taking advantage. So I think people like that would be skeptical at first. And I can see why, because obviously we've seen some horrible things in the past. But if you could trial it and you could definitely ensure, right, this is safe, people are happy to do it, let's go ahead with it. I think it would help the atmosphere. I do.
Well, let's be honest. Let's be honest, guys. I mean, I remember the old stuff, like his mum. I was there in the old Kippax, in the old days, from being about 12 years old. And of course, yeah, I mean, it is so. This rail seating is totally different to what you had in those days. I mean, the chances of something like that coming back are totally non-existent, because there is still control within these rail seats. There's still allocation, if you like. It's not a free for all like it used to be in the old days. And yeah. I stood in that end opposite the whole end at Villa Park. I've stood in the old end for the Cup semi-final as well. Fantastic, and it's brilliant. But is it Wilton? What's the other end called? Is it Wilton?
It was called that. It's now called the Trinity Road end.
Right, yeah. So I remember standing in there and getting my scarf nicked when I was about 13 years old by a Villa fan. But I've never forgiven quite for that. But there you go. I mean, they're all big guys as well. I was on my own and I got my scarf nicked. I won't mind, but we had the same scarves. So it was the same colours. So what was the point? But anyway, as I say, it's a lot more control with this rail seat standing now than those days back in the 60s and 70s when I was first standing up at games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I go to the football and I feed off the atmosphere more than results. Half of the time, that's just me as a person. I love the atmosphere at gigs, events, football, whatever you want to call it. So anything that can improve that, I think I'm all for it. Another thing that, we all get behind and love the atmosphere and the nervousness is today, actually, and that's deadline day. What have you made of the deadline day so far? And do you think, guys, I'll open the floor up to any of you here, really, because we're sort of nearly running out of time. But what have you made of deadline day so far, guys, just quickly?
Well, I'll chip in first. Well, apart from Jack, of course, I'm sorry about that. Mr. Jackie Grealish, I'm talking about. Well, it's been a bit of a damp squib, but I expected it. I'll be honest with you. I was surprised that teams were willing to pay the money they did pay for the players that have moved. But it's been okay. I mean, obviously obviously as far as I'm concerned, the Ronaldo thing was never a goal, in my opinion. It was never going to happen. It's just a way to embarrass City. That's all it was. It was just a way to embarrass us and obviously give the United fans something to cheer about, and hopefully get behind the Glazers again. Now they spent a few quid and brought Ronaldo back. Everything's all hunky dory now. But I mean, I didn't expect too much, and I didn't get much. So that's about it as far as my sort of views on it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting much at all until suddenly I saw we were going to buy Dan James. I was like, right, okay, where's this come from? We sort of had a failed attempt 2 years ago where Swansea did us over and we couldn't sign him, and now I think Ronaldo coming to Man United has almost triggered this move for James to come to us. So I think it's
the price.
Sorry.
for double the price of Ronaldo.
Yeah, I know. They've almost paid off Ronaldo with Dan James. I don't really know how they managed to do it, but yeah, 25 million a price can be debated. But if he gets us into the Champions League this season, then I'm not going to complain. No, that's not happening. Not happening at all. But no, I think he could work well under Bielsa. Bielsa's followed him for years. In his famous Spygate presentation that he did for 2 hours, he had a whole folder on Dan James. It was quite stalkerish at one point. He thought, what sort of information is all in all this? But he's been following him for ages. In terms of what else, I don't think we'll be doing any other bits of business, chucking on Sky Sports. All they talk about is Ronaldo, and it gets to the point where like they try and link Ronaldo to every sort of story, and like trying to link even like Burnley transfers that they're doing today. But how does Ronaldo get into this? And you just sort of, I don't know, getting a bit bored of it. But yeah, for Leeds, I'm happy with James. Yeah.
Yourself?
Sorry, I'm glad that the Dan James will he won't he saga finally has ended and he's actually gone there after what happened a couple of years ago. I think if he could learn how to cross, I think that's a really good signing for Leeds actually, because you did need a bit of pace in the wings. I think. Yeah, best mate's a Leeds fan. And he says he's quite excited by the prospect. I think
Dan James at Leeds will be a far better prospect than Dan James at United. To be honest,
100%. And this is the thing. A lot of some Leeds fans are saying like Man United fans moan about him quite a bit, but he's playing in a squad with world class players. Not that he isn't at Leeds, because Bamford is now technically world class. He's been called up at Phillips, Rafinha, but I guess he looks worse in the Manchester United side. Potentially works better for Bielsa if it improves us. So I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, lads. And for anyone watching, be sure to keep up with all the latest transfer rumours on the Box to Box podcast. The guys will be back later on this evening, all the way through to 11:15. But for all your latest transfer news, so be sure to keep glued to your screen on Facebook and on YouTube. But for all the guests on today, I just want to say thank you, lads, and I've really enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you again next time.
Cheers, lads. Yeah.
Cheers, lads.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Bye-bye.